You're listening to the Bearded Theologians podcast, hosted by Zach Bechtold and Matt Franks. We hope you enjoyed today's podcast and check us out online at beardedtheologians.com. So you're listening to the Bearded Theologians podcast, hosted by Matt Franks
and Zach Bechtold.
So this week on the Bearded Theologians, as we were kind of looking and thinking about what we were going to talk about, this week we noticed in the lectionary that one of those great classic verses that's used in a lot of different places popped up this week, and so we kind of wanted to talk about that. And so we're going to look at Psalm 19:14. And so Zach, as you see that little section there, that little verse there, what are some things that come to your mind?
So Psalm 19:14 says, "Let the words of my mouth and the meditations of my heart be pleasing to you. Let my Lord, my rock, and my redeemer." And it is one of those classic verses. And it's frankly probably one that is misused quite a bit of, you've got to watch what you say. You got to do this. You got to do that. And people use it to bring people down, but it's not a verse for that. I don't think it's what David had in mind. It's this verse of praise and hope of, let what comes out of me be pleasing to you. Let what comes out of me, let it glorify you. And it's this psalm of praise that David writes. And so when I think about that and I take it into my own life, it is the words and things that I use, but it's also the actions. It's also how I interact with the people around me, in all of that. I mean, it's not just what comes out of my mouth, because sometimes that doesn't meet the actions, right? Or sometimes the actions don't meet what comes out of the mouth. And so for me, it's that reminder of just remember who you are, remember where you are, and how is that going to be pleasing to God today? Those actions, those words. And I think that looks a lot different than just being nice or not having a potty mouth or, I think it's knowing who you're around and where you are and what you need to say in those moments, I guess.
I think for me, the thing that I've always found interesting, it's that my experience with it has been always used in the context of, it's the one that's always used before a lot of sermons. Mm-hmm. And I struggle with that a little bit, because Then I feel like it negates anything you do leading up to the service, meaning that like none of that was brought to fruition. That I kind of feel like that. Oh, so then the rest of that stuff was invalid. And that this, like the sermon, like, and I think that's my struggle, is that then that puts the emphasis on like the sermon being the only thing that speaks the word of God into the worship experience. And I have a hard time with that, because I don't think it's just that. I think it's everything that you do in worship has an opportunity to connect people with God. And so like when it's done just in that moment, I feel, and I know people will disagree with me on this, but I feel like that it's just saying that anything we did before then wasn't exactly what that could be, and that that won't invite people in to allow God in that moment. But we want you, like right now in the sermon, like, because by God, I spent X amount of hours on that. This is the important. This is the word of God, and maybe that's just me, but
no, I don't think it is, because I've talked to a lot of people who have ministries throughout worship, whether it's choir directors or praise, whatever it is, outside of the sermon, right? The people leading those things. And they struggle when the pastor gets up and says, okay, now it's time to worship. Now for worship, right? Negating the last 45 minutes of our morning. Yeah, because it is, whether it's we worship through our giving, or we worship through our joys and concerns, or worship through singing or the sermon. It's from the moment we walk into the sanctuary to the moment we leave. It's all worship, right?
It's like I said, I always struggle with that. Now that can be a great little personal prayer for you, maybe before you start service, like. maybe like, I don't know how most people do it, but one of the things that we do at this church is that before worship starts, about an hour and a half before worship starts, we have a team meeting where we go through and everybody, we block it out in essence. And so we always have a group prayer. And part of my prayer is that, Lord, may everything we do, from pushing buttons to singing songs to leading liturgy to preaching to children's moment, everything we do in that moment, may it glorify and honor you in such a way that people make a connection to you. And and then our whole worship is designed with that connection together, that it's all one message, and that the sermon is not necessarily the mountaintop experience. It's not designed to be, but it's really part of a larger narrative of the whole experience. And then I would love for people, when they walk out, if they can say that there was one thing that the service spoke to them on, that's more important to me than my sermon. Like if someone says, hey, the music this week was just spot on to your message this week, then I know that made the connection versus like anything I said in the sermon.
Right.
So
because those are all things we work hard on, right?
Yeah.
Maybe contrary to popular belief, we work hard on all aspects outside of the sermon, right?
Yeah.
Well, what do we do when we take this into our regular life for folks who are listening that aren't clergy?
Well, I think it's simple as this. Like, I was reading an article this week about how parents in strict religious groups, when they're seen to be hypocrites, it causes their children not to be a part of that religious group. And I can't remember if I saw that on Relevant or somewhere. I mean, it was on one of those many things that you see on Facebook that you click and read and all that stuff. But it got me thinking about, with my girls, like, how am I practicing what I preach? How am I showing the girls what it means to go and work with the poor? How am I modeling what it means to be a healthy, faithful Christian, and being honest with my faith with the girls, saying, there are times where I struggle. There are times where it's not as easy as I'd like it to be, like having those serious conversations with my children, I think is going to help them in their faith journeys. And they're going to see where, like, it wasn't perfect for dad and he struggled with this, and this is how he did it. This is how he leaned on faith. This is how I needed the church to help him through this. And I think we need to be more honest about that and be honest about our sin and the forgiveness that we need to seek. I think we become I think pride is one of the biggest things that kills us, and it is killing our church, that we can't let go of that. And that those words that we speak and the meditations of our heart, really, and you highlighted it through our time, talents, and service and all that stuff. I think if we model that in the authentic way that we're called to, we can live into this, whether we're clergy or laity, but not just on a 1 hour a week basis, on a 24/7, 7 day a week kind of deal. And if we have that in kind of in our forefront, in our minds, that like everything we do is an opportunity to share the faith. I mean, could you imagine what that would do?
Right. Well, and I think the authenticity piece is key, right? Because we live in this world where we curate our lives through social media and some other things, which, we've talked about. We've talked about the really good things of social media, and we've talked about the really not so good things. But it's like we've taken this where we used to use it of, well, I'm watching my words, and my words glorify God. And, we did that in person. Well, now we do it on Facebook by sharing pictures of our cup of coffee and our Bible open, whether we're reading that Bible or not, right? It makes a good picture. We curate these things that make us look really good and make us look like we're doing the right things. But it's that authenticity piece to say, man, I had a bad day. This is tough. I worry, I doubt. I have all of these other things that go along to help strengthen my faith.
But I also think too that there's a flip side of that too. There are people that also do the complete negative side to generate that sympathy.
Yeah.
That sympathy thing, saying,
for sure.
Oh, woe is me, trying to get that to make them feel like it's that false sense of making them feel better, that, if I share that with me, and there are people that do that. I mean, there are people that do both sides.
Yes.
And I think that it's truly being honest to who you are. And that's something I've tried to do, is that on my social media, I really try to keep it positive, but I really try to be a positive person. Like
Absolutely.
I try to be very optimistic, and that things are going to be okay. And some of it we don't know. And so like I try to portray that on social media, and I also try to I want to be encouraging to people. I want people to not only dive deeper in their faith, but like be a good human being, if anything. And I think that when we talk about let the words of my mouth and the meditation of my heart be pleasing to you, if we keep that in mind, like everything we do is to glorify and honor God. Like if we kept that in the forefront of our minds, could you imagine what we would accomplish? Could you imagine what what things would be done in the Lord's name if we just kept that focus?
Right. And to be clear, it's not just social media that's doing this. This has been around forever. We're just more aware of it because we're exposed to it more. Where our pool of people was much smaller 15, 20 years ago, 100 years ago, we heard the good, we heard the positive stuff and we heard the negative stuff curated in people's lives just in a smaller range. Social media has opened that up. But yeah, no, it's definitely that. And I think we have to have that authenticity just to say, here's who I am and where I'm at today, and I'm doing my best. And it's that let the words of my mouth and the meditations of my heart be pleasing. And I think regardless of what that is, positive or negative, if we come to it authentic and faithful, it's going to be good, right? We're going to move out of the stuff that weighs us down quicker if we can live in that world of authenticity to say, here's where I'm at today. I'm going to do my best, and go from there, because it's no secret. Some days are better than others. And sometimes it's easier to get out of that funk and other times it's not.
Well, and I also think too that it's living in a sense of authentic life is being yourself, but not being ashamed of being who you are.
Yeah.
And I think while that's a struggle in our, emoji style world that we live in, what if we were willing to sit down and have conversations with people? One of the stories that's kind of been a little bit inspirational for me was the story between Colin Kaepernick and the soldier that called him out for sitting. And he reached out to Colin and said, hey, I don't like that you're sitting. And they sat down and had Colin sought him out because the Marine wrote him a letter. And so Colin sought him out and they had a genuine conversation about what this could mean. And I think part of our problem in today is that we're not willing to have those genuine conversations because we live in even though it's a postmodern world, we live in the sense of modernity and that there's black and white in every situation, and that I'm right and you're wrong. Even though we're both in a situation, there's some situation where both can be right, even though the answers are different.
Right.
And that, there are some things that are 1 + 1 does equal 2. And then there are some things that 1 + 1 = 6.
Right.
And we have to learn to have dialogue and conversation with one another that will be healthy and fruitful. And I think that jumps back to what we've been talking about today, is that if we let the words of our mouth and the meditations of our heart be pleasing to you, if in every conversation our goal was to allow God's light to be shown and allow God to be made real to people, I think that might change the way we think. I think it would cause us to put some of our thoughts and beliefs to a litmus test of God and ask where God's, how does the Micah 6:8 test work on this? And I think that would be very helpful and fruitful for our world today.
I think it would. And it would. I mean, just if we could just forget about being right for a minute and go into conversations just to hear people, I think it would change a lot about our world, at least a lot about ourselves and how we treat other people, to just enter into situations of, I don't have to be right. I'm not looking to be right. I'm just looking to hear and to be heard. And that changes the dynamic of conversations. It changes the dynamic of relationships, and we have to be willing to do that.
Well, and I think that's where learning how to be an active listener is vital and key. And so I mean, I think that's a great challenge for us today, for this week, is how can you be an active listener? How can you work on your listening skills to truly listen to someone?
Right.
And not necessarily put yourself in their shoes, but to hear it from their perspective, to hear it from where their hearts are and where their desires are and how they feel connected to God. I bet that would open you up a little bit more and challenge you in some ways.
The way I describe an active listener is we often listen to respond, and so we're formulating our response and not listening. Being an active listener means we're listening not to respond. We're just listening to hear. And so as you're hearing the people around you this week, stop formulating your response in the middle of their conversation, in the middle of why they're talking. Simply listen and hear them out completely, and know that you don't have to respond. Know that you don't have to have the right answer. Know that you don't have to do anything but hear them. That is being an active listener.
And let the words of your mouth and the meditation of your heart be pleasing to God. We're done.
For those of you who are not watching the podcast, I just mic dropped.
So we want to encourage you to go on the beardedtheologians.com website. We've got some blog posts up for the first time in a long time. Yay. We want to thank our blog writers. And if you're thinking about being a blog writer for us, just send us an email. We'd be glad to connect with you and talk to you about what that could look like. Go on our website at beardedtheologians.com and buy a t-shirt or a mug. Also, if you don't have a podcast app and you're looking for a really good podcast app, I would encourage you to, look at Castbox. They're a semi-partner of ours, and I've really enjoyed using it. I've been using it now for 2 weeks, and
it's great.
I used it on my 8-hour drive yesterday, and really enjoyed its interface and everything about it. It was a lot better than what I had been using. And so we'd encourage you to go on there, like us. You can find us on there fairly easy, and most podcast apps, with the exception of Spotify, because their submission process is just very difficult and they never respond. No. So I want to encourage you to just stay connected with us. Feel free to share conversations with us, and like us, share us, and
subscribe.
Enjoy the conversation. Yes. So for the Bearded Theologians, I'm Matt Franks.
I'm Zach Bechtold. Thanks for checking us out.
We hope you've enjoyed the conversations that we've had today on the Bearded Theologians Beardcast, and we'd encourage you to continue those conversations online at beardedtheologians.com or on our Facebook page. We also hope that you pick up a couple of coffee mugs to satisfy your coffee mug collection. Have a good day.